everyone. Welcome to the Bridge tonight. I am your host, Sara Huber, back again, and so happy to be here tonight with a good friend and member of our church for many years, Carla Spence. Tonight we're talking about mental health in the church. So we're taking a little break from what we usually do in this hour of discussing Pastor Dan's message from Sunday. The Bridge is a time for us to apply that message through the week. But Mental Health Awareness Week is coming up next week. And ahead of that, we wanted to begin tackling this conversation and do that with a member of our church. And I think have a really honest and meaningful conversation ahead of Mental Health Awareness. It's Mental Illness Awareness Week is the proper term, actually, that next week we're observing. And it might give you some things to think about. So we're really glad you're here if you're watching. So glad you're tuning in. And we know that, the next few minutes with Carla will be really, really exciting. And I'm grateful to be having this conversation with her. So let me introduce you to Carla Spence. And Carla, have you share a few words. This is your first time on the Bridge. Been begging her to come on. Carla always has a wonderful perspective and wise words, and this is a great first time for her to be a guest on the Bridge with us. So I'll let you go ahead and...
Okay, thank you for having me, first
sure.
of all. Sarah's asked me to tell you a little about myself. I have been married to a wonderful man for 37 years. We have 4 incredible children, 2 boys, 2 girls. The oldest is 36, and the youngest is 27. I think I got that right. We've attended Covenant for 11 years, and I've been on staff for 9 years. And I do want to say that God has worked through the staff to enrich my life in tremendous ways over these years, and I am forever grateful for the provision that God has given me. So that's my intro.
That's a great intro. And Carla and I had a chance to meet each other over the years and get to know one another even more through our small group. Living Life Together is the name of that particular group. And we actually met at Carla and Mark's house many times over the years on a Thursday evening. So just a really wonderful time to get to know each other. So I'm excited that you're here. And appreciate you sharing a little bit about yourself. There's a lot more that we're going to learn about Carla tonight, but I wanted to first set up the conversation about Mental Illness Awareness Week and the idea of mental health in the church. It's not a conversation that we've had before, and we find that there's actually different perspectives on mental health and issues like depression and anxiety. The Bible talks a lot about our anxiety and our anxious thoughts and our fear. And we could very easily say, pray harder and let's have more faith. And all of those things are really important and they have a time and place. But we also know that the health of our brain is a matter that we really have to take seriously. And so sometimes, we think about the church and how we support one another. Carla and I have talked about, how well this church body really rallies and prays earnestly for one another when we have physical needs. Someone has a baby, there's a wonderful meal train that's starting, and it's just such a blessing to be there for one another. And likewise, being there for one another when it comes to our mental health as well, and continuing to have a place within the body of Christ where we can talk about those things. But there isn't a textbook for that. There really isn't a template for what that looks like. So I'm really grateful that Carla's going to begin talking on that through her own perspective, lots of experience through your work, some of your volunteer work. So that's what we wanted to tackle. There's so much, honestly, that we could say tonight, but we thought we might really focus this conversation on what would it look like for the church to be comfortable and be engaging with one another on mental health. And even before we go out to the streets and we serve others, really making sure that we're serving one another and that we're comfortable in that and confident in that. And that's a journey for all of us. I will say too, Carla, one of the things that we haven't talked about, but I would love for you to feel comfortable expanding on, is the times we're in right now and how mental health is particularly, you really can't not see the challenges of it in our young people with social media and bullying and just the different ways that we react to what's online and what we're consuming online, and then layer into that the pandemic and all the social unrest. It's really, it's always been an important topic, but it seems like now more than ever, many of us are at risk of feeling something and having to deal with that. So that's how we'll open it up. And I'd love to kick it back to you to share a little bit about some of your work with NAMI. It's an organization that we talk about. What does it stand for? Why did you join? What type of experiences have you had with the organization?
Okay, well, NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and it's the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization that's dedicated to improving the lives of individuals and families affected by mental illness. We do that through support, providing support groups and so forth, and education and advocacy. We also work to increase awareness of mental health conditions within the community.
Yeah.
My work specifically at NAMI, I currently serve on the board, and I chair the Faith Outreach Committee. And our committee works a variety of ways in the community to broaden understanding about mental health, what it is, what it isn't, how it affects families, and what we can do to help. It kind of equated to what I say when what we can do to help is if a person is drowning and you don't jump in the water to save them and help them because you're putting yourself at risk too. What you can do is throw a line for a raft. And that's what we can be. And that can help bring them back in. And we can do that through educating ourselves, being familiar with community resources, crisis hotlines. Just be informed. That information is so helpful. And it doesn't take any time to access, and then just to be familiar with.
How many years have you been involved with NAMI?
Probably since 2011, I believe, 10 or 11, not quite sure.
And in those committees and in the leadership and the board that you serve, have you seen a difference in the needs or a spike in the needs, or how you're serving and outreaching through especially the last year and a half with the pandemic?
Well, we usually, when we make presentations to in churches, we've made presentations to congregations, we've made presentations to church leadership, and they were all in person. So having to do the whole Zoom thing was really challenging, and we didn't get the participation that we normally would have. And I think the pandemic has been really stressful for most people, but there is something good that has come out of it, and that's that mental health awareness is so much more upfront than it ever was before. People are beginning to want to talk about it. It's normalized, I guess, if you will. There isn't as much stigma attached. The stigma is still there for sure, but people are a lot more open because it is becoming so much more pervasive with anxiety and, like you were saying, with social media and depression, people being isolated.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge one.
Right. Yeah, it is. Talk a little bit about why you got involved with NAMI, and how did you discover it, and what prompted your involvement?
I first got involved with NAMI when we lost our daughter to suicide in 2009. She was 20 years old, and I guess several months later, I wanted to learn more about how faith communities could better support families who've lost a loved one to suicide, specifically, and then that evolved into wanting to learn more about mental health in general.
Yeah.
Most of the people at our church were very supportive. Our friends were incredible. There were people that would avoid us, though. And it wasn't to be unkind, or they didn't know what to do. Mm-hmm. They were so uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And part of that had to do with stigma. Mm-hmm. We felt, that we're terrible parents. We failed our daughter. And I think part of the reaction of the pulling away is because we were normal, a normal family. Mm-hmm. And if it could happen to us, then it could happen to them.
Sure.
And I think that was very frightening.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, you definitely did. Yeah. Just an incredible story and experience and journey that you, Mark, and your family have gone through. And I know you, and I know that you're very quick to say that God brings purpose in everything, and purpose through these experiences that you've had. And I wonder, in Casey's, with Casey's life, and as you've moved on and remembered her, and you think about different experiences and different challenges as you were parents, what are some of the ways that you've seen God present even in the grieving?
We've seen God's presence in the way people have responded to us in other circumstances.
Yeah.
One of the things right after Casey died, we had we asked the people at our son's school. He was involved in the music department, and there was a madrigal group. And my husband and I had heard them sing many times, and they were just incredible.
Yeah.
And we asked the school staff if the kids could come and sing at Casey's funeral. And they were very sympathetic and supportive of us, but they said because this was a non-school function, the school could not provide transportation. So when the kids and the parents heard about that, they provided their own. Mm-hmm. And they came and they sang, and their voices were incredible. And that's something that I call the gift of presence. That's a gift that people don't realize the value and the impact of that. I never did before this time.
Right.
So that's something that's really special. There was another time when, this was about 2 weeks after Casey passed, and a friend of mine worked at Edible Arrangements. And I got up one morning, and I was just having a really hard time, so I called her, wanted to talk. She said, I'm already on my way to work. I'm going to be the only one there today, so just come on over. So I did, and she took me into the back prep area, which was very cold, that she didn't warn me about. But she was back there, and she was cutting the fruit and making the baskets and so forth. And I was just pouring out my heart to God and just, why, and just sobbing.
Yeah.
And she didn't offer wise words. I didn't need wise words. Mm-hmm. She gave me what I did need, and that was her presence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So those are 2 examples.
It's a beautiful. Both of those stories you can visualize, and they clearly were so meaningful in the way you speak about them and remember them, in the way that they still bless you. Mm-hmm. Why going to the idea of gift of presence? Because I don't want to gloss over that. I love the term, and it is probably one of the most important things for us as Christians to to be challenged to do. And I wonder if you can go a little bit deeper on what does it look like to give the gift of presence, and when are we not giving it? Because some of the things that we've talked about, I've been guilty of this myself, and I've been on the receiving end and the giving end of trying to solve problems that aren't mine to solve, trying to find the words that I don't really need to find, trying to point to the reference in Scripture that will be like the thing this person really needs to hear. And we do that, and it's actually not helpful. And I think that as Christians, we're more prone to that, to not wanting to see the suffering and not wanting to see the struggle, right? And to exhort each other. And again, there is a time and a place for that. But let's focus a little bit more on what it looks like to give the gift of presence, and some tips that you might have that we can be thinking about and apply in our relationships.
I think touching on what you just said about wanting to want to fix.
Yeah,
We want to fix the situation because it's comfortable for us.
that's right. Yeah.
And just being able to be okay sitting in silence. Just being with someone, you don't have to have words of wisdom. You don't have to have just the right thing to say, but sometimes it's just a matter of sitting with someone and letting them grieve or letting them, tell their story, and admitting to them, I don't have the answers, but I care about how you're feeling. I want to hear your story. It matters to me. I know you're hurting. I mean, those types of things are I'm saying that they're easy. I don't know how easy it is for other people to be that open, to want to listen to someone else's pain. But it's very beneficial.
Yeah.
And listening, I think, is one of the most difficult things that we can do sometimes, especially when we're uncomfortable.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Why do you, you've, I think you actually get the credit for titling tonight's bridge, Mental Health and the Church. And I know that that's something that you care deeply about, that God has put on your heart. Why do you think Christians struggle with responding and knowing how to support one another and see something and intervene? Do you think that there's a particular challenge that we're more prone to as Christians, just from your experiences, both in NAMI and just, living your own faith walk? Like, I wonder if it's, I think that sometimes we can be prone to self-righteousness, and that idea of having answers, or that idea of being self-sufficient, or something that we talked a lot about is the stigma, and you mentioned it earlier. And I wonder if the stigma of mental health and mental issues is hidden in the church, right? But we're all human beings, and we all have challenges. But it's interesting, I think, for us as Christians to recognize how we need to be more alert on this, and more open and comfortable, and care for one another like we do when we know that someone is sick and in the hospital, right? Like, and having that same level of don't pull away, right? Yeah.
So it's I guess, joke, if you will, that suicide is the no casserole illness. For every other illness, every other, if there's any other form of grief, if there's a death of a loved one or whatever, you get tons of casseroles, you get cards, you get all sorts of things. But people are fearful of that, for whatever, like I talked about before, I think don't understand it. I think there's a little judgment involved, like, what mistakes did you make? No, you're not a very good parent. We tend to think that mental illness, mental health conditions are out there. They're not in here. When the truth is 1 in 5 people live with a mental health condition. And you think about the number of people that are involved in churches. You're probably sitting next to someone who is living with a mental health condition, or yourself, or someone, someone in your family, a friend. It's so much more
prevalent.
I guess prevalent, than we would ever think, because we don't address it.
Yeah.
And once we create an atmosphere where people feel comfortable talking about mental health, then you're going to see people come out and say, "Oh yeah, I'm struggling with this," or my sister, or a friend down the street, or whatever. Yeah, and I really want to know how to help that person. When we create an atmosphere within the church of acceptance, that makes a huge difference. When we equip ourselves with the knowledge, with the tools, to be able to engage people who are living with mental health conditions, that's when we really start to grow. And that's when we're making a place of comfort and security for people here. That goes for church leadership, as well as congregants. Then we will be equipped to then go out and minister to people in the community. I'd liken it to, when you're on an airplane and they tell you, put on your oxygen mask before you help someone else. That's what the church needs to do. Put on that oxygen mask, equip ourselves, so then we can then go out with the tools, with the knowledge to come alongside other people and give them hope and give them help.
Yeah, such great advice and very practical suggestions in there. I want to go through them again because there's 3 E's here that you make it really easy to remember. So you talked about education, equipping, and engaging. Is that right? Okay. So walk us through, what does it look like to be educated in mental health, and to be more fluent and empathetic to handle different relationships and experiences and conversations that you hear? So what do we do to begin feeling more educated and educating ourselves and leaning into this?
I would say the first thing is, NAMI has so many resources, so many community resources, and NAMI is national. There are hundreds of affiliates, state and local affiliates. You can go online, you can get resources from NAMI. There's another resource online, it's called FaithNet, and that is about mental health in faith communities. There are tons of resources there. Having people come in, and either professionals or speakers can come in and talk about the basics of mental illness, different mental health conditions, what to look for, what are the warning signs. That just basic information. It's not, everybody doesn't need to be a counselor, so I think people are maybe shy away from that because they think, oh, I'm not equipped, I don't have the knowledge, what if I make a mistake? Learning about mental health conditions is really very simple, when it comes right down to it. So just being equipped with that knowledge is huge. And then that becomes a tool then to relate to other people, both inside the church and outside. It's what you can teach your children. You talk about they're on social media and that kind of thing. Equip your kids. Equip your kids.
How do you talk about it with your kids, and even in your family? How do you look out for each other, and what do those questions sound like, or how do you just check in, especially when you have teens or they're older and they're more independent and they're not sharing as much. I guess what are some of the things that you've learned that can really help connect and bridge important conversation?
I guess with our family, because we had that experience, I mean, in the beginning, we did talk about it a little more openly. And an example that I think one of our kids learned kind of by watching. An example is our youngest son was online, with a friend, and he saw some posts on Facebook, and that alerted him. And then he talked to Mark and said, "Hey, Dad, come take a look at this." And because he was informed, because he had the experience, and he learned from that. He learned, okay, I'm going to reach out. I'm not going to just stand by. I'm going to reach out, and I'm going to do something. And that was huge. And then Mark was able to connect with the mom, and the situation worked out well. But just being aware, just being aware of some of the warning signs when someone isn't involved in the things they used to be involved in. The activities aren't as fulfilling as they used to be. If they start giving items away, if they're sleeping more or eating more than they normally did, those types of things. When you're aware of the signs to look for, it becomes a lot easier to then engage and say, "Hey, I notice you're not, coming to practice as much as you did before. Something up." Or, "I noticed you seemed kind of, distant. Is there anything going on?" Just those kinds of things. It's just generally being observant of what the behavior was compared to what you're seeing. Now.
Yeah. So, really being present in those relationships and present in the lives of our families and our loved ones. So, the takeaway, the gift of presence, and then being present are two really good takeaways. Education, equip, engage. I wanted to highlight a little bit more on some of the things that you and I had a chance to talk about offline about why we want to watch ourselves in that thought pattern of, well, you need to be a better Christian. You need to be stronger, Carla, right?
You need to pray more.
You need to pray more.
And harder.
You need to trust God, right? And I had a very challenging time in my life where I'm certain that I was battling some level of depression and anxiety, and I never talked about it, but I talk often about the challenges that we had with fertility and a unexplained infertility that was like a stigma, and how challenging that was. And because it went on for 10 years of our lives, of our marriage, and so much happens in 10 years, it was like this thing that I just felt was always on me and over me, and it's, in some ways, I can look back on that time, and I'm grateful that I understood that there was something different about that season. There was darkness. There was the constant exercise of praying, committing all of the concern, the fear, the unknown, everything to God, feeling a moment of hope, and then like another wave of, and I always described it as like an onion that you would feel like, okay, I think I have freedom from this. I think I'm released from this stronghold. And it was like a marathon. You just like another mile, and so that's a very hard thing to go through. And I remember being really frustrated when I was given advice to, you just need to trust God, right? Or, like those things that's what we mean about, there are times when we want to encourage in that way. And there are times when, I should have been talking to somebody and I should have been, having some other help and resources because that would have helped me. But I think, in my personal case, there was an issue there. There's a stigma. There's a shame. And it's hard. It's really, really hard, all of the battles that we go through. And I can look back on that and say, God was with me 100%, but I knew that because I'm resolute in that, but I can't say I always felt it. Now, where I had the breakthrough, and I've talked about this before on the bridge, was the blessing of other people believing on my behalf and other people having the hope, other people like you and Mark having the hope and just optimism in a way that I couldn't and I didn't. And that, I think, is another thing that we can do for one another. The gift of presence is by far, I think, first and foremost, because just show up for each other. Mm-hmm. But I think secondly, I would almost add to that list, rallying and praying and hoping and encouraging and realizing, you know what, if you don't feel it, I will, and walking together, in our journeys. And that was something that really blessed me. And I felt like this can't be a hold on me anymore, because look at this support system, right? Mm-hmm. Look at this friendship and these prayer warriors, and we're going to have a breakthrough. But it needed all of that. It needed family, friends. Like this has got to be released.
Right. I remember the night we told our small group about Casey's death, and the whole group came. They came to our house. They made a circle around us, and they prayed. And I remember just praying and saying, God, I don't understand. I love you, but I don't understand. Mm-hmm. And they were there in a flash. Mm-hmm. And I did feel that blanket of prayer, when they were there. Mm-hmm. God was definitely working through that. And what you were talking about, God works through his people. All through the Bible, God works through his people. So those people are also doctors. They're creators of medicine. Yeah. They are counselors. So when people say, no, don't do that, that's not, you just need to pray more. Mm-hmm. No, these are the people that God's putting, in our path. Yeah. We are his hands and feet. This is another way of being his hands and feet. And for us to trust, okay, these resources are available. God's giving me these resources. Mm-hmm. I'm going to use them.
I'm going to use them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's right. And it's not a substitute. It's, right? Like we continue to pray. We continue to go through that process of walking with him, even when we feel we don't understand, even when we feel like God isn't present. You have to keep that up, but there is more that you can do and more ways that people can come alongside and help. Right. And I think that's so important, that that we put ourselves in isolation sometimes. Mm-hmm. I know in my circumstance, I certainly did. Mm-hmm.
And I think part of that is because we assume people are not going to understand, or assume that people are going to be really uncomfortable and they don't want to talk. Yeah. A lot of times they are, but give people a chance to interact or not interact. Yeah. I remember going to church for the first time after Casey died, and it was a big church, and everybody's standing and singing these songs of praise, and I didn't want to sing songs of praise. Yeah. I wanted to beat on God's chest and say, why? Why did you do this? Why did you allow this to happen? And that was, I loved him, but I was angry with him. But his love for me was far greater than my anger or my questions and accusations.
Yeah.
And I did learn that God is much bigger than the circumstances that seem to contradict his goodness.
Say it again. It's a quote. It's a quote for the evening. I love when you say that. Yeah.
God is much bigger than the circumstances that seem to contradict his goodness.
The circumstances.
And he's patient. He waited for me to circle back around to what I knew to be true about his character.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you handle, were there any other times in your life when you felt that angry with God? And if that stands out, how do you get through that? How did that go away? How did you come back around?
Well, one of the things that was really helpful for me is there was a night that I just wanted to, I was so angry, I just wanted to scream. And I couldn't do it in the house. So it was at night, and I got a throw pillow, and I went out walking through our neighborhood in the dark so nobody could see me, and just screamed into the pillow as I was walking down the street.
Yeah.
And just screamed and wailed at God, and just shaking my fist at him. And it's just that love-anger, dichotomy, and it was just going, and those two very strong emotions just collided.
Yeah. Yeah.
So get a pillow.
Get a pillow and let it out.
Let it out, yes.
Yeah.
Just holding it in and trying to be Christian and not angry with God. God can take our anger.
Mm-hmm.
He can take our anger. He can take our indifference. He can take anything that we have to dish out because it's in our heart anyway, and he knows.
Do you see people holding it in a lot, though?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think so, and saying the right things, saying the things that sound godly.
Right.
But in their hearts, they're still crying out.
Yeah. Struggling.
And wanting answers. It's okay to want answers, but also to be okay with not getting them.
Yeah.
Or not getting the answer that you think you should get.
That's a big thing. Do you feel like you have answers, and do you feel like you're still asking for answers?
I don't ask why anymore,
Yeah.
for the most part. It creeps in every once in a while. But I changed that. I changed my question to how. So how do you want me to use what's come into my life for your glory, for my good, and for the good of other people? And he's given me and Mark so many opportunities to come alongside other people and walk with them through a journey of grief. Just opportunities that only God could orchestrate.
Right.
A friend of a friend of a friend. Oh yeah, I remember that, you went through this with Casey, and so is it okay if I give this person your number? That just happened with us, and the husband talked with Mark, and the wife talked with me, and it was, we hadn't seen the people that connected us for years. Our daughters played lacrosse together.
Yeah.
But he remembered that and made that connection. So things like that happen a lot.
Yeah. It's so powerful to, I love what you said of changing the question instead of why to how. And I think God's okay when we ask why, but we can really be blessed when we move into, how do I use this? Right? Because I think that's healing for us as well. You've talked a little bit about the way, the way you see yourself as a vessel or a window. You would talk a little bit more about that and how I think so many different experiences in your life. You are really pure and true to the idea that when I show up and when I open my mouth, it's God's glory. It's God's, I see that a lot in you, but I just would love for you to speak a little bit about that. I think that's a conviction that you have, and also like almost, like a vision for your life, something that's really important to you.
One thing I do want to say, before I address that is I stopped focusing on what was taken away from me and started being much more aware of what I have. Just down to the smallest thing, like getting in the car to run an errand. I have stopped and thanked God for protecting me up to that point in time while I'm driving. Because I don't know what's going to happen in the next moment, but he has given me that protection. Thank you for bringing my husband home safely.
Yeah.
Thank you for that trip to the grocery store that I was able to, get what I needed. It's so easy for us to think about what we don't have or, what was taken away and long for that. But when we stop and think about even the most minute things, and it sounds cliche, but, looking out at your garden and just seeing the spectacle of that, that's a gift.
Do you want to talk about that story?
The garden.
Yeah.
For Casey's 21st birthday we knew that it was going to be difficult for the entire family and for friends, Casey's friends. So we decided to invite everyone over to help us create a memory garden for Casey. And we just asked everyone to bring something, for the garden. And we were blown away by the response. People helped clear the space. They laid topsoil. They brought flowers and bulbs and trees and grasses and just everything that you could think of. And shrubbery. They laid a slate foundation for a wrought iron bench. They brought garden ornaments. And the activity started early in the morning and went well into the evening. And it was incredible. They gave their presence.
Yeah.
And we keep coming back to that, how important it is to just be there. You don't have to do anything spectacular. Just be there. Be available.
Yep. And how much that still blesses you.
Oh, yeah.
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 Yeah. I love that, just being able to look for God's provisions in everything and redirect our mind off of what we're wanting, what we're lacking, what we're missing, to everything he's putting together on our behalf right now.
I do want to tell you about a quote that I just read recently. It was from Streams in the Desert. And he said that we are set free not from suffering, but through suffering. And it says, the common touch of humanity that gives the world true kinship is not joy, but sorrow. If you want your sympathy for others to be enlarged, you must be willing to have your life narrowed to certain degrees of suffering. Joseph's dungeon was the very road to his throne.
Yeah. Wow.
And that really resonated with me. That yes, in order to have compassion, you need to have had situations where you suffered.
Yeah.
And that's where our growth happens, right? I mean, how much growth have you had when everything is easy? I know I haven't, and I've taken it for granted.
Yeah. Growth, and I think character and the way God grows, just the wisdom, in us when we go through that such struggles. I think that's such a process that's important to wrestle with the why and come to the realization of, like, I'm going to change the question, right? And like all of that that's life, that's living it, that's living out our faith, and that's so real, and that's why I'm so grateful for this conversation with you, Carla. Just really kind and encouraging words in the chat right now from those who are listening. Thank you, Carla, for sharing your personal story, you're such a blessing to our church, helping educate so that we can engage.
I mean, even Jesus asked why.
Yeah.
You know, why am I going through this? Why take this cup from me if you can? Why do I have to endure this?
Yeah.
So God is, I think he anticipates our whys.
Yeah. I think we have to be real with one another about that too, and not be judgmental to our brothers and sisters when we hear that.
Mm-hmm.
It's all right. They're not walking away from the church and dropping their faith. It's fine. You have to say that. Sometimes I think we have to hear ourselves say it out loud to realize, like, whoa, I'm not going to say that again, but we think a lot of things and we don't say it. And I think, for me at least, when I say something out loud and I hear my words with my ears, it usually is a place for me to take it's a good way for me to take inventory and say, no, I don't really feel that way. And no, I don't really doubt you. I just can't see it right now. God help me, but I think we shouldn't be so afraid and to jump on that and say, don't say that and don't think that. I think that's where I think Christians can be more prone to struggle with acceptance and, being the support system that, for others it might come more naturally because they're not trying to live this book and wrestle with it, the book, the Bible, for their lives. So
I think the Bible is meant to be wrestled with.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. I love the different quotes that you shared today and the idea of being set free through our suffering. Just how important, taking away the gift of presence, and spending just an hour to educate ourselves. We don't need to get a PhD in mental illness, and to take inventory of our own minds. I think that's something that I can contribute to this conversation of, we have to audit our feelings and know, okay, that's a feeling and that's fleeting, but where is my mind on this? And what does my brain need? Because there's a spiritual realm of this, and there's what is good health for my brain right now?
Right.
What does that look like?
Right.
And how do I respond to that? And then, of course, for one another.
Our feelings aren't necessarily truth.
Yeah, definitely not.
Right.
Definitely not. But they can really, our emotions and our feelings can really shape our thoughts. And that's where I think we have to be diligent. Just diligent as, in our prayers and in our conversations. And the other thing that you said that I think is worth pulling out too is just the kindness and compassion for one another and just having mercy, just showing one another grace and mercy. I've seen that a lot actually in the workplace, in my workplace. I've seen so many of my coworkers just go through different challenges, just the shift of being at home all the time and the isolation of that. And like, wow, I love seeing my coworkers, or I love being able to get up and get dressed and go and feel like, and this is the same old thing every single day, and the rut that it creates. And then before you know it, someone's on medical leave because they're not doing well. And so I think that I have just personally seen in the workplace and all around, not just my own workforce, but that we give each other that space and we say, hey, you do what you need to do. And so I love just bringing this back to what is the application and the opportunity for Christians in the body of Christ. Appreciate you beginning the conversation. We're at the end of our conversation tonight, but Carla's just beginning her conversation. If you're listening, I want to ask you to pray with us and and one of the prayers that I have is that that Carla and Mark would continue to have boldness and strength and conviction in sharing their story and their experiences, their knowledge, because it is as real as it gets, and that's what the church needs. You've been a blessing to me and a blessing to all of us this past hour. So we'll be praying that you continue. You're talking all the time, even through NAMI, but I think specifically as you have a passion for how does this come to the church, and how do we do this really well for one another? I'll be praying for you because I think that you're one of our leaders in that, and that a lot of us look to you. So we appreciate your heart and your voice tonight.
Thank you. And I am. I feel so blessed that our church leadership is behind this 100%.
Yeah.
That's such a gift to me, personally, and it will be a gift to the body as well.
Yeah, agreed. Well, thank you, everyone, for your encouragement online tonight and your comments. And that will be a wrap for tonight's Bridge. Thanks again, Carla, for being with us. And we hope you all have a good night and take care.